25th. Everything is temporary. Life isn't fair. Family matters more than friends. Others treat you the way you treat yourself. Kind of beneath anger, there's always fear. Happiness is a choice and requires hard work. A lifetime isn't as long as you think. The typo is mine, actually. That was original. The biggest risk is not taking any risks. Things don't matter so much. Any guess that don't do that either? It's not over enough to have to have it. Any guesses too? Go ahead. Warren Buffett. All right. So today we're going to run through our goals. We're going to review our assumptions and decisions that we've had the last couple of council or ways and means meetings. We're going to spend some time on the wage and comp study update. Personnel committee has already had an update, but the rest of us will get there if we get a decision point that we need to make with regard to next steps. Then we'll dive into our budget information. We'll do our debt schedule review. We'll look at high level fiscal 22 budget draft one. We'll look at our personnel costs. A lot of it familiar from last year. We will review our merit pool options for current year. Any possible additions to the fiscal 22 budget, and then anything else you're going to need before we go. So some of what you're going to see on the screen is eye chart worthy for sure. So you've got hard copies in front of you. Looks like you do, hopefully all of you. And we'll get to that momentarily. So goals for today, we need to agree on our assumptions and conclusions. Again, we've already looked at revenue and expenses. We've got some other specific details that we'll need to agree to, or agree on the projects that we want to include in this year's budget, like we did last year. We need to finalize our merit pool decisions so we can go away and work those. Get grounded here momentarily on the wage and comp study work. And we'll gain agreement on whatever our variables are, so me, Debbie, Brian can go away and produce draft. Hopefully, two, which will be final. One workshop this year, that's. All right, then Ray, you want us to do some technology here, you want to introduce the way you comp process and.
Hi, Nancy, thank you for being here. I am going to introduce her to be in our consultant, who works with Evergreen Solutions. The company that the city hired to conduct the study and analysis here. The result of getting some recommendations for any adjustments that they need to be made to our current structure. And also a big component of the work that they're doing for us is it guide the city in the development of the conversation of politics. We've talked and heard a lot from employees about sort of the lack of consistency that the city has had in terms of how we deal with merit increases and compensation. And the goal is that the city council can develop a compensation philosophy that we can use even for many, many years. Obviously, there's going to be a flexibility component to it because we never know what happens and we want to be able to respond when changes. But I think everybody agrees that having something consistent that the employees can fully understand and city council support is the ideal thing. So Nancy, with that, I'll hand it over to you.
Sure. I think that's the debate, that's the discussion that we need to have, is not whether or not we want to be midpoint or what median or aligned with the town. Whether we want to be aligned, whether we want to be lead. I think we need to be lead, but realistically. Yeah.
May I ask a couple questions? We are such a unique community in so many regards, in our police and our fire, public safety. For police, we're a resort community. We probably have more traffic, parking, drinking violations. You go to North Charleston and you're gonna find a whole another type of situation. And there's a lot of young officers who would rather be, as they call it, running and gunning, as opposed to giving tickets and dealing with parking violations. The fire department, same thing. I mean, you've got an ISO rating 1, which is great, but there's not that many fires out here. They are constantly on call for a jellyfish tank or a fender bender, and we have to react to each and every call as if we don't know what's there. And we can't go and get a rapid response vehicle because that's more personnel, another vehicle, very expensive, even though it makes sense to have something like that. Instead, we drive these big fire trucks down here, not knowing what to expect. So, we're such a unique community. We talk about Jupiter and Satellite Beach and Stewart, compared to inland and South Carolina. So I look at our chiefs and it's a hard thing to balance. And also when you try to drive out here, it's an hour's drive to come from North Charleston and Somerville to get here. And there's a traffic jam, it's even worse. So I mean, there's so many factors that are going to go into this. And then to get 3 people like us, say I'm the worst one, I just go to work to get a paycheck. And then you got Randy goes to work and says, all right, I'm going to do above my thing. And Ryan goes to work and says, I want to help the new people coming on the job and help them train and stuff. So I mean, there's all different factors of employees. So this is something that we've got to try to, how do we evaluate that? And who makes that decision? Or is it Eddie Haskell saying, hello, Mrs. Cleveland, why don't you look nice today? And behind your back, you're doing something else.
Well, we recommend like, Nancy, if you don't mind speaking up, we're trying to capture your audio for the video for those who are watching, and I think they're having trouble hearing. Okay. They have
Is it working?
it is, you have to talk into
You
it.
gotta well, you're far enough away, you probably should look at it.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, yes, go ahead.
Better. No.
Just to make sure it's on.
Hold on a minute, Bob's coming.
It's on.
That's definitely off. Still off?
There we go.
Now.
You have to start all over again.
Yeah, I definitely do. Okay. So, how do you, I think the question is, how do you handle or what do you make of all of that?
Very complicated.
It's a very complicated thing. So our benefits, if you look at benefits, why does somebody want, a family, I don't have a family, I don't need that benefit anymore. So, in total, and if you look at studies still, where does compensation come into play? Compensation in many cases is still not necessarily number one, but it is absolutely many times when people are going, I want to work in this environment, it's too hard, it's wrong.
Councilmember Moy's comment. And I would like to understand what other cities do. When we talk about midpoints, established, studied, real midpoints. I can say just as one, my expectation is if we have a segment or employee below the midpoint unacceptably, that this body would say the first thing we have to do is fix it. Right? So you kind of start with that. When you work up the pay scale, and I think where the concerns are in cost envelope, we're also notorious on this island for not raising taxes, right? So your trade-off becomes elimination of services and jobs versus pay increase, right? So any guidance you can provide us, I think everybody has to have a realistic view. You have choice points. You can't just keep raising salaries without raising revenue. We are not good at raising revenue here. So as, you know, we position the study through ways and means, it's taking a realistic view of, you know, there may come a time where we want to do this. We want to keep the best and brightest, that the cost trade-offs that come with it is we as a community have to pay more for that. So, John, I think that's where you were heading. It is a cost. I mean, it's a cost level. At some point, you just can't continue on this path without addressing the reality of having to raise revenues on a 5 square mile lot.
So, again, with that being consideration, and again, doing many studies, those who have either had the same issue and or just, they were considerably behind the market, if you will, and clustering of employee salaries, typically what they do is say, we want to at least make progress. We want to begin to make progress. Going back to the philosophy, this is our plan. We want to get to this point. So, Evergreen, help us come up with that. It could be phased approaches, okay? Actually, we're doing another study for somebody right now in the Northeast who they just were behind. So, but they couldn't do very much, so for phasing, here's at least keep a set goal, I would say, of we want to get to this point. We're going to do this. It's going to cost some money, likely. Can you do that all? Can you fix, I call it, can you fix everything in one fell swoop? Not necessarily, from the cost standpoint. So then have a goal. We want to get to this point. Reasonably, once you see the cost, when we estimate that, it may take you 3 years, it may take 2 iterations of that, quite frankly. But move to that point, or try to, if you will, move to that point. And obviously, yes, it could be that you need to do that. You don't, not everybody does it in one fell swoop. Fix what's occurred over time anymore, not unlike other organizations who have that same concern. If you are moving salaries, we
It might be. Is it rechargeable? It had a red light, which seems. Yeah, we're gonna change the battery.
everybody understands that you can't always do that, you know, move salaries, but at least in trying or understanding, keeping.
It's a battery issue.
This is not a.
We are trying to make that one in here.
This is not a.
Battery's dead.
This is not a commercial for doing studies and take shots. In reality, whether it's us or anybody else, those who commit, if you will, to we want to try and get there, and then keep your, keep things going. Don't wait 12 years to do a study, that's the good news you did, okay? But don't do that. So those who continue to do that, and at like a 3-year mark after this study, for example, you do what we call just a compensation update. Not quite the same level, but you're checking things, having you what I call good maintenance in between. Then it's less costly. You're trying to move things up. So that's what we have to do.
If I may. So very, very practically, I think Nancy is looking, I know this was the case, the personnel, she's looking for guidance from this body so that she can go back and do the work. So this is actually something where we need to weigh in and say, this is where we like to be, whether that's 50th percentile, 55th percentile, 60th percentile. You're looking for that specificity of, here's where we would like to be, aligning at 50% or leading at some other percentile. And I want to say, if memory serves, there was, I don't know if we had consensus because we were making a decision, but around 60% seemed like where my memory said the discussion was at. And honestly, I don't know, I think that was kind of based on what we heard from you in terms of community like ours, looking at what's necessary in order to attract and retain talent and, you know, recognize some of the circumstances of being employed on our island, that seemed like a pretty reasonable goal. When you talked about the service level of somewhere like Jupiter, it wasn't far above and beyond the expectations that we're setting for our staff. And so that 70th percentile was at a whole different level, and that's certainly something we could say, like, hey, you know what, we want to pick it up a notch. That goes to Randy's point about raising taxes. It's like, if our community, if we feel like the voice of the community is saying, hey, we actually want much higher level services, and I don't even know what that would look like. Like, if that's what we heard, then we would go back to the community and say, sure, but it means a tax increase, and they probably say, never mind. But the point being, I think 60% was around where if we were making a recommendation, and Ryan and Randy, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that's more or less what we would have brought to the table today.
These seats, that's what we talked about.
I think that's actually a pretty good percentile, but at the same time, going back to your very last point there, reward strategy. We have a new police chief. He's been with us just
Almost
over 2 years now. And what he has done in the police department, rewards, and promotions, and recognition, I think, you know, our employees deserve that, you know, within every department we have. And I think Chief has done a great job there, and I think we've got a lot of room to improve across the city along those lines, because it's not always about money.
Nancy, can we get to what our decision points are?
Yes. Yes. So thank you. So market position, again, we can calculate a couple of different points. So I think I'm hearing calculate competitive, and calculate 60%. We can give you both figures, cost figures. Would that be good?
From newly establishment.
Yes,
Correct.
competitive, yes.
I think, I just wanted to make the point that we don't know if our salary ranges are currently on point. We have to know that first and see what it would take to take us to a competitive level and then up from that. More competitive.
We don't want to say 60 and find out we're actually 40.
No, you're gonna get the market information, but then literally very quickly, we're going to do the calculations anyway, so. And it's probably, it's, you know, whatever. It's just, if we know that you're at least considering it, that's what we need to know, so. We'll do competitive, if you will, and then total compensation, I'm going to go on a limb here, and I understand that I don't think there are any major changes there, so I don't think there's anything to decide there, okay? Structure design, what type of pay plan or pay plans does the city want to administer? So, currently you have open range. There might be some, interest, if you will, in having staff in public safety, or at least in part of the public safety. I'm not sure if both in police and fire, but that is, but again, you know, I'd like to know what your thoughts are on that.
I was going to ask the police chief.
If I can just make one comment real quick, I think the simple answer is everything outside of public safety, we want to keep open range. So we can check that box. The question is really just strictly around public safety, if we want to change that from open range to staff.
No, I, you know, none of us are from police or fire department. I actually would like to hear input. From our public safety is the majority of personnel costs on the island is public safety. And I can say I don't think there's a person here that doesn't want to be extremely competitive in public safety. Chief, you knew you were going to get the microphone.
I dressed just for this occasion. It's a hard answer. Well, ideally, I want to say yes, a STEP program is nice to retain any public safety officials we have, because the difficulties we have in our public safety buildings now, or our public safety agencies, is we don't have a lot of room for promotion. And that is a lot of reasons why we lose people to other agencies. They can go to a larger agency, there's more opportunities to make corporal, sergeant, to go to these specialized units. So a STEP program would be helpful for those things. And I know some of the negative side of that would be, well, are you rewarding negative employees? And I think the answer to that would be, if we're doing our job the right way, we're documenting negative employees, and we're taking steps to take care of those employees and to move them out of the workplace or to bring them back into a compliance status where they're happy again and they're no longer in that negative area. So I think a STEP program does help with retaining people, most certainly in the fire and police side, especially in a smaller agency, because there's not room to grow. There's not room to make all those different ones, and even the positions that are available are very few. And so they come around. When's the last time we had a police chief opening? Other than mine, it was 20-something years, 30 years. Same thing with the fire chief position. And with that, those other positions underneath it stay stagnant. And when they're stagnant, there's no room for growth for other people. So the hope is that we hire employees that want to grow and excel in their career. If we don't give them something to help retain them and give them that opportunity, then I do fear that we would lose them to those other agencies that provide that opportunity.
I have a question, Anthony. So in the STEP programs that you have seen, can they still be tied to performance?
So I think that was your question as well. Yes, and it can be one of two ways, I'll say. The predominant way that I see is it's tied to performance and the person doesn't get the step increase if they don't perform. Pretty simple, okay? Or you don't perform, you don't get the step, you don't. And then the other way is designing it such that one could possibly get an additional step for high performance. Could be that way. It's a little different, don't see that much. But could be designed in that manner.
So Nancy, to that question, that would presume that anybody who's, I'm used to a 5-point scale. So you get a 3, you've done your job, you have an Excel. But a 3 would get the same as a 5 unless you have an incremental program that rewards exceptional performance.
Yeah, yes. In the pass fail step, if you will. Yes, the 3 would get the same as the 5. And the get an additional step, I would imagine the 5 would get the additional step. It generally, though, makes the step lane a little bit
So what do you do the
challenging.
next year?
Mhm.
The next year, they're, well,
Yeah, we can work out the logistics. Let's keep on our decision points so we can keep going.
I do have a question about that market position. When you're talking about the percentiles that you're shooting for, are you looking at that always at an overall, or you're breaking that down by department and by position as well, or?
So good question. So I took that to mean overall, the whole plan. I'm going to call it anchored at whichever one of those positions, not individually different departments. Is that your question?
Yeah, or like fire department, police department.
You could have that. Most organizations don't do that, but some do. You could have, and that was on the slide, so thank you again, yes. There were some who will say we want these to lead, these not. Now, the way we develop our file, literally that could be a decision, that could be something later that you decide as well. It could be something that you, we will be slotting positions, technical, at both positions anyway, so you can then point to what we want to slot in one position versus another. Okay? Yes.
Do we know what other communities in our area, if they use this stuff, are they right?
We're collecting that data now with our salary survey. Okay? I'm sure that some of the, public safety knows that, but yes, we're collecting some of that. And that is another thing, sometimes you want to be more like your, definitely when we're looking at the market range splits and things like that. Okay.
Did you have an indication from your interviews if there was a strong preference one way or another from public safety?
Definitely.
I'm trying to be very clear, so we're looking for a decision point on that. We've heard from the team, we've heard from what your interviews. It sounds like we at least would like to go in that direction unless something comes out of the house that would make that untenable.
Okay, thank you. Okay, reward strategy, right? Okay? This is, again, I don't need an absolute, but I need like not this, not that, okay? On reward strategy. So, basically I'm gonna do it like this. Time alone, you can get a step or move through the open range just based on how long they've been with the city or how long they've been in classification without regard to performance? Is that a consideration, time alone?
No.
Okay, so how about time and performance, or a consideration for time and performance? Performance only?
Can I add, I think the best thing that personnel, not that we have any long tenured employees sitting here. The question that I asked in personnel is the one that I noticed several times a year. What happens when you're at the high end of your range and you're capped and you're a strong performer and you don't have a position to move to that's an increased position? How do you handle that? And I think that's the big moose on the table with a long tenured city.
So if you, when we develop at least a competitive plan, whether it's step or open range, okay, there's a minimum and a maximum. In performance only structures or reward strategies, I should say, typically, not exclusively, and again, it's your decision. Once you reach the midpoint, proficiently sets in your get that midpoint, and you go beyond that, again, competitive or ahead of the market, then you are getting paid more than most people are by the virtue of the whole idea that it's ahead of the market and beyond the midpoint. You're getting paid more than most people are meant to do that work. So some organizations say once you get to that maximum or 75th to whatever, or even past the midpoint, you, while an excellent performer, you may or may not get the same, and typically not, get the same percentage increase as those who haven't reached that midpoint, because you're trying to keep the highest performance. Not that you don't want to keep the people, long tenure, but you're already being paid a lot. The reason that is because those employees are being paid competitively already to do that work. It's your decision. Do you want to continue? You don't have to, I call it slow that down beyond the midpoint. And you can even say, well, we want to keep giving, we want to get a set percentage related to performance. And the step plan, it would be that way anyway, how that's designed, pass, fail, or 2 steps, what have you. But in an open range, it could be, we want to let people work at a set. If you get a 4, you get X percent regardless of where you are. And if you're at the max, you can't decide this. It's not necessarily good compensation practice, but you can't say, well, let people go to the maximum. It is your decision. Not necessarily how, the best, if you will, or the most common, I should say best practice, maybe not the best, the most common, but it can be done.
We had this conversation a couple of years ago, personnel, because we do have a handful of folks that have reached the end of the range, and what our research found was, in neighboring communities, what they were doing is whatever the percentage they received based on performance, it would get as a one-time payment or one bonus. It wouldn't affect their hourly rate or their range, but they would still be compensated. I'm sure.
And that is the typical practice. And again, it is solely based on the fact that because they're already getting paid well above the market position. So lump sums, normally, yes, you don't have people below the range and you don't have employees going outside of the range, but they get a lump sum up to including that. And again, we don't know where that is, so we you may be moving the structure, over this much, give some people room for increases that weren't previously, at that point. So,
If you have several high earners with a lot of longevity, can that skew your overall percentile of where you are, how competitive, like, do you compensate for that somehow?
okay, so we're looking, thank you, good question. We're actually comparing where the ranges are, not where individual salaries are. We are looking at individual salaries in that, in the implementation and what I discussed before about the assessment. Certainly, obviously, that's another point, but
Okay, thank you.
we're setting a range, good point there. Ranges. Okay, so not times. And that's probably, and probably performance, some iteration of performance, right? Yes. That's probably all we need to, again, when we make recommendations, we don't want to do anything that upsets that. So just stay tuned. We don't want to put salaries, recommend salaries in there based on time alone, if that's not what you need. Okay.
Perfect.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you.
Okay.
You can stay right on the table if you don't mind. Thank you. Thank you so much for traveling and coming in person.
Yes.
Enjoying our microphones.
Or lack thereof.
Thank you all.
Definite pie chart. You have this in front of you, it's in the budget package. Just want to do a really quick review of where we sit, where we sit from a debt standpoint before we get into, budget and such. So we have, the rec center rolling off in 23. That's roughly $250,000 a year that we pay. That will go away in 23. Then we have, Fire Station 2 coming off in 26. You can see the rest of it there. So and at the bottom, Debbie's done a calculation on what our debt limit is. So we are way under our debt limit. Again, this is, I think, the next to last page of your budget package. Any questions on the debt stuff? But you can see our last couple of items had rates of 1.71, 2.16, 1.83, so really good rates, and we're going to talk about that in a minute when we talk about the next fire truck we need to buy. We want to finance it. This is your second page in your budget package, or it's in your handout as well. Jason and Kraus, sorry, I don't think we have any. Oh, no, one extra.
I can move you back there.
Sorry about that. Yeah. So before we look at a really high-level summary of the budget, just to give you, again, this is in your packet on the budget as well as that separate handout you guys have, just to give you a feel for what sits in our budget, if you will, from a very high level. So high level, first item is we move most of drainage phase 3 into fiscal 22 because we're obviously not going to make that happen in fiscal 21. A little bit of cost will go out, but most of it will move into fiscal 22, 2.5 million roughly. $525,000 replacement of a fire pumper truck. Right now, we're saying what's in the budget right now is no debt incurred with that. But we'll talk about that in a minute, it's a possible change if you want to. $290,000 full replacement of fire department self-contained breathing apparatus equipment. We've got tagged $250,000 for a comprehensive drainage plan this year, so we've taken out the $500,000 for small drainage projects and we're going to take care of the comprehensive plans. We kind of know what to tackle next, if you will. $250,000 to maintain, renovate, or construct beach access paths. We talked, I think at the last Ways and Means, 195,000 for underground and electrical lines over 3 years, so we have those 3 projects that are there. We got 40,000 in fiscal 22, so it's just more of a timing issue for when Dominion could pull it off, the bandwidth we have for being able to oversee and handle a project. 150,000 to convert water sports dock area into a public dock with green space. Item 8, consistent through the fire chief interviews, the need for an additional assistant chief, for lack of a better term. Grant writing, we've got almost 400,000 in for new revenues related to the Sweetgrass Inn. We've got about 92,000 in for the new restaurant revenue. The rest of it's just transfer. So again, that's what's included in this draft fiscal 22 budget.
I have a couple questions. On number 1, the drainage outfall project, does that include, raising, the cost of raising the path?
Depends on where the bids come in, quite honestly. On the drainage phase 3.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe, how about that? Yeah, hopeful.
And, the, underground electrical lines, is that 195,000 each year for 3 years?
No, it's just this, in what's in fiscal 22. Well, actually, it's on 40, is the 3 projects that were identified. What's in fiscal 22, what does it say, 40,000?
Correct. What we did is we staggered them, so we have one each year, just recognizing that we're likely not gonna be able to do all 3 at once.
Okay.
So we staggered it, and actually the budget that you have in front of you has the marina undergrounding in year 3, and we were talking about maybe moving it closer to maybe FY 22 or FY 23.
Okay. So that's more based on ability, not ability to pay, but ability to get things done.
That's correct. I think if you remember, Susan and Jimmy, Dominion said it's 3 or 4 months worth of engineering and design costs. You know, so we don't want to do it in season, so. Yeah, you get to fiscal 23 pretty quickly when you kind of take that out.
And then-
So, Mr. Chairman,
Hang on.
Oh, okay, and my last question was, you go.
No, go ahead, finish up.
Okay, my last question was on number 7, and whether that, we discussed using money from the tree fund
Yes.
for, is it that 150,000 is separate from the tree fund?
No,
Yes.
we can decide how to pay
Okay.
later, we just tag it right now with that. That's correct.
I was just, can we move that underground marina to the top of the list? Did we talk about that?
I mean, we've got all, I'm not sure what the conversation has been with Dominion at this point, but,
That's actually the easiest bit. Well, and we're doing everything, we're fixing everything down there. It's nice to get that done.
yeah, but again, think about it, we went to Dominion tomorrow and said, this is our first project, make it happen as fast as we can, it's the fall.
Yeah, like it.
Okay.
Nobody has hands or legs.
Well, I think, although Dominion indicated that the actual planning will take several months. So I think we're worried about the construction. It may actually time out. The construction period might time out with the season,
Yeah.
off season. So, I mean, I'm fine with that. I would be fine with switching it up. If we're going to be stretching it out that long, over 3 years, there might be some logic.
Our projects, we obviously have a big expense there that's coming up, so, this year, we obviously have a big expense there that's coming up, so, this year's budget's a lot easier than last year without the COVID overhang. Our big financing was done last year in our 2 big projects. This is kind of a basic budget, if you will, in my opinion, from where we were last year. The questions on what's included or kind of where we are with expenses and or fund balances, Debbie or Desiree, anything to add? Feel okay from a
Easier than the last.
revenue and expense standpoint? charts don't get any better, I'll just tell you right now. This one's in your packet, it's probably page 4 or 5, I think, in your budget packet. It's also in your separate handouts that you have on your table. I mean, we don't need to spend time here, because I'm going to jump real quickly into merit decisions. I mean, you're used to seeing this chart. It's kind of what it is, and has been quite a number of years with our 91 employees, the percentages in red across the bottom.
Page
3, thank you, Rusty. So let's move quickly to here. You've got this, is this one in the handout too? Last handout. So I know we just had a long conversation about comp strategy. Kind of set that aside, if you will, because that's more of a future conversation and a future attack, if you will, depending on how the numbers come back. What I want to have this conversation so that we can go away and create draft 2 is, and the numbers or the years get a little wonky, just given when things are effective and what they're effective for, but just walk with me. Donnie, just walk with me for a minute, okay? So really what you have in your fiscal 22 budget is this column here, and all we're trying to show is what's already built into that budget is a 2% merit pool that's going to be effective 1/1/21, that Desiree and department heads are in the process of completing reviews and spreading that in some way, shape, or form. So what we've tried to do is show you what those costs are from a salary and a fringes standpoint, depending on where we want to go. Or if you wanted to go somewhere in between, above, below that, here's what an additional merit would be. Randy?
Yeah, I've got a question on that. With Nancy's work, and I'm not sure the timeline when we get the finished product right, but we should all be cognizant that 2.5% could be low, right? Because with that framework for the next fiscal year's budget, if the midpoints come back that we're off, if we're substantially below market, we're targeting 60%, to get my numbers right here. That placeholder until, I'm guessing, in the next budget iteration, and I know you're trying to not have too many of these. Placeholder until, I'm guessing, in the next budget iteration, and I know you're trying to not have too many of these. But hopefully we'll have the data back that tells us where the plug on that number goes. So I just think for this purpose, as a placeholder, it's great. The reality is it could be off.
And what we need to do to go from point A to point B. That's a separate conversation to me, if that makes sense. Yes, ma'am.
So I'm not sure where is a good point to ask this question, but is it possible for us to think about aligning our raises with the fiscal year? Because I find that we are making this decision for next calendar year, like it's March of 2021. We're making 2021. We're making decisions that will go into effect in almost a year from now, when we talk about the next year's raises.
Right, but it's based on our best guess of the revenue for the next 12 months.
If we aligned the raises with the fiscal year, we could be making that, there wouldn't be as much of a window in between. Is that something that anybody else does? Like, is it common to have your fiscal year set and have your calendar
That's
year?
kind of the way we've always done
I don't know how other people do it, but we don't know how other people do it. What we typically do is just, evaluations are done at the beginning of the year, and then the merit increase goes into effect first of the year. I don't know if it would make it a lot more complicated doing it the way that you're suggesting, or I don't understand what the goal would be
Yeah.
to do that.
I guess it would be so that we would be setting a percentage increase based on something that's going to be put in place in 6 months or 3 months instead of, 9 months away.
Yeah, but that doesn't, I mean, just speaking personally, that doesn't cause me too much angst, because I feel like we've got pretty good hands around a revenue standpoint. If you think it's confusing.
I guess it's more based on cost of living, or Like, for example, we were put in a position because of COVID to make decisions for, you know, a long term, that for when something that was going to go into effect 9 months later. So you're kind of it seems like you're guessing more in terms of cost of living and financial revenue in some cases, where you would be guessing a little bit less if you were talking about it closer.
I guess, again, my only comment to that would be, I'm glad we were set up the way we were, given last year with COVID, to be quite honest with you. It gave us a lot of flexibility from a timing standpoint, or to change our mind before something got implemented. Mayor?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. We were very conservative last year, and I'm glad we were. I think it's way past time for us to go forward with this. And that 2.5, got to do it. No ifs, ands, or buts about
So let me make sure I understand your comment. So you're suggesting,
So with going into effect now, those would be built into the final numbers that she would use. So if the city implements a 4.5 virtually, if we do the 2 for FY '21, and we capture last year's 2.5, then, you know, that's gonna be built into the final number that they have. So maybe the adjustments that may be necessary for some positions may not be as high as maybe they would have if we hadn't had this year's interviews.
right. You need to vote on this? Or just make it happen?
I would like a motion.
All right, I'll make a motion that we recapture the fiscal 20 budgeted merit of 2.5% and add it to the fiscal 21 budget of 2% merit that's already on the board, and put in a 2.5% merit for our fiscal 22 budget.
I'll second that. Effective, January 1st.
Two pieces are effective 1/1/21, the 2 and the 2.5, and then for the fiscal budget would be 1/1/22.
That's consistent.
Yeah.
So we would be using, I guess for my folks, we'd be applying a total of 4.5 to this current evaluation.
That's correct.
No, not go back up like.
That's correct.
Okay.
Thank you. You want to roll call vote?
Just want to say that I know that all of the staff is going to be very appreciative of that.
Yeah. Nicole?
Councilmember Smith.
Aye.
Councilmember Moy.
Aye.
Councilmember King.
Aye.
Councilmember Bell.
Aye.
Councilmember Thompson.
Aye.
Councilmember Streeton.
Aye.
Mayor Carroll.
Aye.
Councilmember Towns.
Aye.
All in favor?
Thank you. I think that's a great decision. I think we, rightly or wrongly, made the right decision last year to hold off on that raise. Desiree and Debbie and I were having a conversation yesterday in prepping. You kind of forget when March, April, May came along last year, there were layoffs happening all over the place. Municipalities, corporations, pick it. We didn't do that. And I'm glad we didn't do that. And I'm glad we're doing this, because I think we had a much better year than we thought we were going to have. And I think, Mayor, it's time to get back a little bit. So good conversation. All right. So this next page looks a little bit daunting, like the other ones didn't. There's really only 3 or 4 items on this page that we need to talk about, I promise. Because some of it's just transfer going in and out, quite honestly. So so these are possible additions to the 2022 draft budget that you have in front of you. So let's just focus first on the fiscal 22 column, if you will. So the few items that we talked earlier about the purchase of the fire pumper truck. Right now, we're planning on paying cash for that. Debbie's put in a potential path that if we wanted to finance that, the rates would be really good. We've got plenty of room in our debt limits. That doesn't mean we should, take on additional debt, but I just wanted to have a little conversation around what you felt like or what your reaction to either paying cash or financing that. Randy?
I'm a huge advocate of leasing the bridge for low.
Others?
Bill, I agree that rates so low, those financial.
not use our cash and finance it. Jim,
Say that this is gonna be our only work session.
I'm hoping.
This budget stayed at 323. What is this budget, what is today's date? It's the 25th. I was hoping that maybe you might reconsider, another work session, so I hadn't had time to study this.
Yeah.
Everything, I feel it's one thing I noticed, the marina maintenance fund is a big deal to me, and that's been cut down to 0.5%. And I got a question about that,
Yeah.
whether that be 1%. I was wondering if you would, reconsider it.
Yeah, we kind of did the same thing with the public safety building. In year one, I think we took it to 0, or maybe a half at the same time since everything was new.
Okay, I see everything is right there.
Yeah,
But you see, I just like to have some time to go through it. I don't know about anybody else.
well, I mean, everybody's had it for a weekish, give or take, so this is just the current version that you're holding in front of you. So let me run through real quick what's potential. So I think I'm hearing finance, the armor truck. You need to vote on that.
I guess, we have a fair amount of money in the bank, so, I mean,
Do you spend all your cash borrowing rates or what?
It's a philosophy thing, I mean, it's a philosophy answer for sure.
I mean,
It's
you know,
a question.
you're still paying extra money to borrow money.
Ryan?
You know, I was a big advocate, Gary, I was a big advocate of purchasing equipment. You know, in other words, we end up having so much inventory of leased equipment, and the interest rates were super high at that time. I mean, 1% was good. It was even higher than that, and we have a lot of other issues that we need to, I mean, drainage is a big one, that we need to solve and wrap our head around.
Waterway half.
Waterway half, and other things that we need to.
That's not fair.
So while the interest rates are low, go ahead and take advantage of it. Take advantage of it, because we can still pay it off early. Right. There's no penalty in paying it off early.
Okay.
So what we'll do is we'll incorporate these decisions in the next draft.
Yeah.
That one.
So the comment was really incorporate these additions, so that's one. All right, so the next one on fiscal 22 is a really small number. $20,000 partnership with the Water and Sewer Commission on the 7th Avenue beautification. Again, Susan kind of gave your earlier comment, how we pay for it, make them out of the tree fund, make them out of general funds, we can decide that later. But that is probably a fiscal 22 item we need to add. Again, just going down the fiscal 22 column, you see a $300,000 number and a $400,000 number down below. This is insurance premium increase for our new marina dock world. So, this is not a quote, this is Debbie Desperate and I coming up with the extrapolation from what we're paying currently for the dock insurance. You know, people have gotten out of this business. The rates are really high right now. I mean, there's a couple options we have here, just like you do with your own home insurance. We can really jack up the deductible. We can not cover everything. We can self-insure pieces, parts, or some combination of all of that. Or other ideas that somebody may have, because I think we're gonna have trouble finding a carrier that's gonna do this for us. So it's gonna kind of be buyer beware to some extent, unfortunately, but Randy,
It's a bit of a question for Desiree.
I pick a number. Paying somebody $500,000 for an insurance policy on our marina is just doesn't feel right.
No, I mean, kind of feel where I'm coming from, and I don't know the answer. Is there catastrophic, right? Which says if we got hit with a hurricane, we're covered under catastrophic. But other, more typical repairs that you would see that might be insurance covered that are on the back of the city is self-insured.
So the best quotes that we've received so far are for a premium of $252,000 for $5 million in coverage, so that assumes that the project is included, with deductibles of $20,000 and $400,000. So $20,000 for occurrence and then $400,000 for situations of complete damage, maybe storm, hurricane, We are in the process of trying to secure additional quotes.
Which I think is gonna be tough.
It's gonna be tough. Our broker did indicate that there might be 2 others that may be interested in putting up a quote, but I think we're still gonna be looking at a 6-figure number.
At that rate, we might.
Yeah, go ahead, Mayor, sorry.
Mr. Chair, I made a mistake of dropping off the book of Hurricane Judy that Desiree and Ron to take a look at, showing our Marino and Louise zone. I mean, it's not a matter of, but a matter of time, it's going to happen.
Mayor, would you advocate for something like Randy's saying, because that's where I am. I think we either raise the deductible really high because we do have a decent cash position right now, and or look at some type of catastrophic coverage.
We did my list of, yes.
Others, Susan, yes?
I agree.
When y'all say catastrophic coverage, what do you mean exactly? Like if it's a $5 million value on new construction, are you willing to go for $1 million deductible?
I mean, it's all rate dependent.
I would, but that's just normal.
So,
But we should get.
Rate dependent, yes.
So $1 million's not too high for a deductible. We can kind of get some.
If it's even an
quotes
option,
around.
yeah.
What's the total value gonna be?
I think if you just take the cost of the current project, roughly $5 million.
Yeah.
Rough, I mean, there's existing infrastructure there, obviously.
And they'll let you, I mean, insure for depreciated value. We can insure whatever value we want. I mean, and I guess that's kind of the balance.
Yeah.
Then what would be the useful life?
that's the answer.
For the new dogs,
15 years?
20 to
20 to
25.
Is that according to the code, or is that just?
This is from our engineer's estimate and based on the manufacturing and the materials of the new.
So you take 20 and divide by 5 million. Well, I tell you, that all this is spooky. Jimmy remembers, I mean, our marina was on, all our piers were on Goat Island. Along with all the boats. Yeah, with all the boats.
Well, Jimmy, I think, that, to me, that's why we're not gonna, as opposed to it being a cost of doing business for that business, the city's picked it up for years and years and years. I would like to see us personally discontinue that practice starting in 23. Any reactions?
I agree as well.
Mayor or Jimmy, I don't know if there's history, we've gone back to records and minutes and talked to people just to see if there's, I talked to Donnie, obviously, we've been involved with some of this.
I think that if you do that, some people in the commercial district are going to.
Structures that sit around the island attached to a business,
Yes.
if you will.
Chairman,
Yep.
may speculate what might happen. Now, the commercial enterprise, they really can't say a whole lot because the city's picking up the bill. But there's a huge rodent and pest management problem with these dumpsters, especially the ones at the front gate. I'm just saying, watch out. You could have a whole lot of complaints and people balking at paying for it unless we improve the sanitation. And then it is a problem, right, Donnie? I mean, it's just inherent.
One other thing you have to consider is, right now, the city does pick up the per dump per week. However, each business has to pick up the user fee at the end of the year. So they are paying the county user fee, which is the more expensive part of that deal.
All right, just in the interest of time, let's keep rocking here just a little bit. So let's move to fiscal 24. The only additional item there is improving the T-dock on the Intercoastal Waterway, $250,000. You remember that's not included in our current marina project. It was newer, didn't really need replacing at the time, so this is just a placeholder for that, sorry, that's right, placeholder for that particular dock.
Just for point of clarity for everybody, that's the dock where half of that is the Morgan Creek Grill side is with the restaurant, the other half is with the marina.
Yeah, that's like,
Yes, ma'am.
So, that dock, I just wanted to clarify, make sure that you all remember, so that dock is included in the permitted project that we have going on. So that permit will be good for 5 years, so there is an expectation that that dock will be replaced in accordance with those concepts that were approved 2 years ago by council in the next 5 years. We do have updated numbers though, just using the numbers we just went through. We're looking at about $450,000 project for the T-Dock. And that number may go up if we're talking about 3 years from now.
Desiree, refresh my memory, that was the replacement of the finger dock with full dock as well.
Correct, and it also pushes the T-Dock and the piles farther into the intercoastal to get more sort of deep water in that dock.
Yeah, you're seeing a lot more numbers on this page, but it's just about how you're paying for things and transferring between funds. So that's why I'm just hitting the new projects for each year. So this last one, placeholder in fiscal 25. You'll recall in fiscal 22, we had the cost to get the permit for dredging the marina. This cost we're paying in 2025 at $750,000, just as a placeholder. Who pays can be a whole conversation later. But we're permitting it this year and planning to dredge it in 25. Question, Deborah?
Which is another correction, we have more information. Just using current costs of current dredging projects, based on the number of cubic yards of mud that would have to be, removed from that area, we're looking at a $1.5 million project.
That's a little different. Mayor?
To Desiree's point, right now, they're trying to dredge down in my office. There is no site, no spoil site available, even for the city of Isle Palms. The Army Corps of Engineers has closed it off to everyone. If you want to use their site, you gotta take 125% of the material out of those spoil sites and take it off there, which raises that price probably 4 to 5 times.
Which is a big one.
So I think we're gonna be grossly under, just a wake-up call.
Yeah, good point. Yep,
Until to that point, we're under zero.
understand. I mean, it's just not addressed in the lease of who pays. I mean,
Well, we had the discussion through multiple real property
Right.
committees as to the marina operator being responsible for dredging, and to the mayor's point. And I've had others tell me, it's pretty much stalled, it's a no-go for Denver.
Is this a, opportunity for?
and so I think we have enough to go away and read our second draft. Whether we get a final one or not, to be determined. But there really wasn't, well, the merit information obviously for today, that's probably the biggest effect for our fiscal 22, but, I don't feel like there's too much that's gonna affect our fund balance information where we were sitting today, once we put this information in. What else? Desiree, anything? Good.
The transfers to the capital projects will go down because we use the positive net result from FY to the general fund to transfer into the capital project fund. So since we're increasing that number for salaries and wage and fringes, that will directly impact how much we can transfer at the end of the year to capital.
That's the only way that gets funded.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
there is a need for another budget workshop. I'm not sure if there is, I just want more time to review it. To be done in the April Ways and Means Committee.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That same time.
Absolutely. Yes.